Now that I've explained what comprehensible input is, the next question becomes, how do you do it? Where do you find comprehensible input content? How should it feel when you're listening to comprehensible input? And how do you know you're progressing? In this video, we're going to break down those three questions. As I said in the last video, listening to native level content like movies or TV series in the language you want to learn is just going to sound like noise. It's going to sound like gibberish. The most important thing when listening to comprehensible input is that the input you're listening to is comprehensible or understandable. This is going to be impossible if you're not listening to content that's specifically made for people trying to learn a language. For that reason, when you do comprehensible input, you're going to need to find content and content creators who specifically make content for comprehensible input learners. Luckily, for most popular languages, creators exist for this type of content on YouTube, Spotify, and other platforms. On my website, Lengualytics, what I do is I aggregate all of these sources and rank them by difficulty, so it's easy to find content that you'll understand at whatever level you're at. What you'll notice is that every language has their own unique way of grading content, and the issue with this is, for one, it's not standardized across all languages, but it's also usually based on traditional learning methods and not comprehensible input learning methods. For that reason, on my site, I've broken the difficulties up into 4 distinct levels based completely on comprehensible input learning. If you want to get a description of those levels, again, you can check it out on the website, lengualytics.com. Now that we've gone over where to find content, the next question is, what does it feel like to listen to comprehensible input? What should it feel like? The number one mistake people make when they first get into comprehensible input is trying to analyze and translate the language in their head as they hear it, as opposed to focusing on the actual message of what the presenter is trying to convey. It's very important to fight this urge and try to focus on the actual message of the content and not get bogged down with thinking about the mechanisms of the language or trying to directly translate sentences as you hear them. In the beginning stages, it's completely natural to feel very uncomfortable when you're listening to content in a foreign language. Our brains don't like that kind of uncertainty and ambiguity. No matter how slow a presenter presents or how many visuals they show you, there are always going to be things that you just don't understand, and our brains really want to fill in those gaps and really want to analyze and get the full picture. And if you're the kind of person who likes to note take and really get every detail, this can be super frustrating. You'll need to get comfortable with not understanding everything you hear and trusting in your brain's natural process of pattern recognition, that even though you can't really feel yourself understanding or getting better every single second you're watching the content, that in the background your brain is recognizing patterns and your fluency is developing, even though you can't consciously feel it. And as an absolute beginner, it's unlikely you're going to be understanding a lot of what the presenter is saying outside of nouns, verbs, and common expressions. You don't need to understand every connecting word or verb tenses or the structural components of the language to build your fluency. I want to repeat this point because it's one of the most misunderstood parts of comprehensible input. When you're watching content in your target language, you are not trying to understand the language, you're trying to understand the meaning, what the presenter is saying. The topic of the video, whether it's food, culture, sports, or any topic, should be the only thing you're focused on. Translating in your head is a big hurdle, so I want to dedicate a section here to talking about it. Almost every single person who learns a language through comprehensible input will struggle with the desire to translate in their heads. It's something you'll need to consciously turn off as you're trying to listen to content. The truth is, in the beginning, you probably will understand more if you're translating in your head, but that becomes a bad habit and hurts you down the line as you progress in your language learning journey, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Firstly, translating in your head pulls your attention away from the content you're actually trying to consume and understand and actively pay attention to, but also it forces the language through the lens of your native language, which is not good, especially in the long run, because you end up not getting an intuitive idea of how the language you're learning is actually spoken. You're kind of filtering it through your native one, and languages do not map one-to-one to each other. And because of this mismatch, because languages don't line up one-to-one, you're creating this barrier where the idea of comprehensible input is sounds directly to meaning. But if you're translating in your head, you're getting sounds Now I have to translate to my native language and then meaning. And that creates a barrier for an intuitive understanding of the target language. And as you progress, this habit just becomes more and more limiting because speech becomes faster and more natural. And basically what you'll realize is, wow, I cannot translate in my head. It's just not fast enough. My processing isn't fast enough. And at that point, you'll probably realize, maybe I've been cheating, and my actual intuitive understanding of the language is a lot lower than I thought. But with all that said, it's important to remember that you're human, and translation will always naturally kind of slip into your learning. So you shouldn't be obsessed over it. You should treat it as a habit you're trying to overcome, because again, that's just gonna pull you away from the actual content you're trying to understand. The truth is, if you don't know any other language, your brain has had tens of thousands of hours listening only to your native language. So rewiring your brain to be comfortable listening to a language that isn't your native language takes time, and it's not something that's gonna just happen. You can't just rewire your brain in a snap because you tell yourself, don't translate in your head. It's not as easy as willing it into existence. It's something you have to train and get better at avoiding. So that's what it should feel like when you're consuming comprehensible input content. But how do you know you're progressing? The most basic way you can tell you're progressing is if you're understanding the message of the presenter better and better as you listen to more and more content. That is abstractly the way you can tell you're getting better at comprehensible input as an absolute beginner. But that's not super concrete. So let me break down something a little bit more concrete so you have a little bit more to kind of actually feel like, okay, I can kind of see myself doing this. The first thing you'll probably notice you picking up on as an absolute beginner are intros and outros to videos. Because if you hear a person say, "Hi, my name is Nick, welcome to another comprehensible input video where I do X." Those words you hear so often, they become the first thing you get a real intuitive feel for. So that's probably the first thing you'll feel as you watch more and more comprehensible input. They'll start to feel automatic, no translation in the head. You hear them speak those words, and it starts to sound a little bit more each time like it's your native language, like you understand it intuitively as you do me speaking to you right now. The next thing you'll probably notice yourself understanding more intuitively are nouns, verbs, and common expressions. And you'll also start to notice that connecting these things together, you'll start understanding small chunks of meaning intuitively, naturally, without translating in your head. When I say short chunks of meaning, this is actually an important concept in comprehensible input because a lot of the time our brains aren't really good at actually understanding singular words. So let me give you an example. If you were learning English and you kept hearing someone say, "How are you?" you might not understand what each of those separate word means outside of the context of "how are you?" But when someone says, "How are you?" that phrase will become clear to you. It'll become clear what that person is trying to express. So you'll start to recognize these common chunks of meaning of multiple words. Even though you can't understand the single words, together you'll be like, oh, I know what that is, right? And that's another sign that you're definitely progressing in comprehensible input. Now, as you move into the high beginner or intermediate phase, you'll probably start to notice that you can predict the next word of the presenter. This happens because most languages use a small set of common words in daily conversation, so you get very accustomed to these words that keep on appearing. And when the presenter is speaking very slowly, your brain just starts to anticipate as they speak slowly to you, the next word they'll say. This is when you begin to actually understand the spoken language in simple context. When you get to that level, that's when I'd say the real light bulb comes on and you say, okay, this is definitely working. Thanks for watching episode 2 of my How to Learn a Language with Comprehensible Input series. In the next episode, we're gonna talk about the importance of consuming content that actually interests you. We're gonna talk about when you should be looking up words and more. Finally, if you're on the comprehensible input journey, you need to be tracking your progress. And to track your progress and find new content, the best way you can do that is going to my site, Lengualytics, checking it out. There you'll be able to visually see your progress happening, and you'll be able to find new content every day. It gets recommended to you. You get big lists of content. It's the best website, in my opinion, in any language to track your progress and find new content for comprehensible input learners. And thank you. I'll see you in the next video.